in marriages. Knowing how to handle situations the best way may not always come naturally to us. I'm sure you can recall a time when you wish you would have handled a situation differently, but you might not have known how. So we've all had conflict at one time or another, whether it be with a spouse, a family member, or maybe even a supervisor at work. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to manage these conflicts. Due to my many titles, one is mom, another is wife, realtor, coach, I've come into contact with conflict on a daily basis. And I've not only learned how to manage this conflict through experience, but also from researching conflict resolution. And when doing my research, I found that there's three main things to consider when trying to resolve conflict. The first of these things is to ask yourself, what are the types of conflict? And what are the types of conflict resolutions? Then, the second thing is you're going to want to identify the conflict you're having. You're also going to want to ask yourself, what is the desired outcome of not only you, but the other party involved? The third thing is going to be deciding which strategy to use to manage this conflict. If you're able to answer these questions, you'll be able to effectively resolve this conflict. So to get started, let's begin with the types of conflict. There are 5 types of conflict, the first of which is affective conflict. Affective conflict is when you have incompatible feelings with another person. An example of this would be a couple that's dating where one might want to get married, but the other person might want to date other people. That's an example of affective conflict. Next, we have conflict of interest, which is where the parties disagree in a plan of action. An example of this would again be a couple where the woman might want to move to another town, but the man wants to stay, and establish themselves in their hometown. So that's an example of conflict of interest. Next, we have value conflict. Value conflict is when two people from different religious backgrounds or have different beliefs, different values and views are in disagreement about how to do something. One might want to do it according to their beliefs, the other would want to do it according to his or her beliefs. Next, we have cognitive conflict. Cognitive conflict is when people... Cognitive conflict is when people think and understand things differently or interpret things differently. Next, we have goal conflict. Goal conflict is when both parties have a different desired outcome. So now that we've gone over the types of conflict, let's go over the types of conflict resolution strategies. The first of which is dominant style. The dominant style, or the dominant approach, it's also known as the win or lose approach, is when you're more concerned with yourself versus the other person or the other party. So the next one we have is obliging style. Obliging style is when you're more concerned with the relationship as a whole versus the parties as individuals. That would be obliging style. Next we have compromising style, or the compromising approach, which is when both parties are willing to give up something in order to kind of come and meet in the middle. That's compromising style. After that, we have avoiding. The avoiding style is when you really don't want to deal with the conflict and you just have hopes that it's going to resolve itself eventually, so you kind of don't do anything about it. That's avoiding. The last one we have is integrating. Integrating is when you come together and you discuss your feelings and give each other your ideas and your input, and you come out with a solution that's going to benefit both of you, or it's going to give both of you what you want. That's integrating style. So now that you're familiar with the types of conflicts and the types of conflict resolution, let's move on to managing conflict. So the first thing you need to do when you're going to manage conflict is identify the type of conflict you're having. What is the cause of this conflict? Who are the parties involved? What's the outcome you're hoping for? What's the outcome the other person's hoping for? These are things you're going to want to ask yourself when you're identifying that conflict. Now that you've answered those, you're going to want to decide on which resolution to use. So again, you're going to ask yourself some questions. You know, you're going to say, do you care about the other person, or do you care more about yourself? If you care more about yourself, then you're going to use a dominating style. If you're willing to sacrifice something and meet this person in the middle, then use a compromising style. If you want the conflict to just resolve itself and you just don't want to deal with it, then use the avoiding style. And if you're willing to communicate with the other person and work with them and try to come up with a solution that's going to give both parties what they need or what they desire, then you're going to use the integrated style. So we all encounter conflicts, you know, throughout our lifetime with different people. So it's very important that we learn to manage these conflicts. And by learning how to manage these conflicts, it's not only going to benefit us, but it's going to benefit other people as well. Think about the children who are going to be affected by conflict in a marriage. If you're able to better manage that conflict, it won't have such a big impact on the children. Another example would be when there's unresolved conflict between an employee and a supervisor at work. There's all this tension there, and it's going to make other employees uncomfortable. So it's very important that we learn to manage this conflict, and by knowing and being familiar with the types of conflict and the types of resolution, we're able to make a more informed decision on how to manage these conflicts. And all in all, that's going to allow us to maintain our relationships and have longer lasting relationships.